Cartoon Network was always my favorite channel growing up. They had all my favorite shows, they always had the best commercials. In the early to mid 2000s, the CN City bumpers played during commercial breaks. One giant city where all the characters from all their shows live together. This is widely considered to be one of the best eras of the network. And these were a lot of fun. It was cool getting to see characters from different cartoons interacting with each other. It also showed that they fit pretty well together. Nobody feels out of place. It's a believable shared world.
Laundry day? Yeah.
I don't know, makes sense to me. Now, crossovers were nothing new for Cartoon Network. They had done plenty of commercials prior to this with their different characters interacting, including a commercial on Nickelodeon of all places.
Hurry up! We're not even supposed to be on this channel!
Cartoon Network is. Ooh, hey, pretty mama.
Johnny!
There have even been some crossover games. Most of them were small flash games with a couple racing and party games on consoles. And they did a couple crossover specials. But the world building of Cartoon Network City was one of the most ambitious crossovers the network had done, and would be for the next couple of years. Cartoon Network City was cool and all, but you want to know what would be even cooler? Getting to see all of my favorite beloved characters die in war.
Hello? Professor, are you here? Hello? Oh gosh! Hello?
Late one night in early 2008, I was playing Flash games on CartoonNetwork.com, and I saw an ad on the side for something called Fusionfall, an online game where you could team up with players across the world to save the Cartoon Network universe from an alien invasion, and all of the characters look like this now? The promotional videos coming out leading up to the game's release were insane. There's the falling meteorites and all these crazy monsters, and then there's all the big monster truck. Dexter is talking to Ben 10 as he's fighting aliens in the city, and then there's this tiny flying Dexter. Everything about this game looked unbelievably cool, and then you see what the actual game looks like. I've put more hours into Fusionfall than almost any other game I've ever played. I loved this thing as a kid. Now, the game did shut down back in 2013, but through fan revivals, it lives on. I'll put some links in the description if you want to play the game. The revival is kind of a ghost town. You can join one of the many forums and Discord servers to find people to play with, but it's pretty rare that you'll actually find random people running around. For most people, this isn't fun anymore. The entire draw of the game is gone, but I don't mind one bit. See, I'm a weirdo who likes playing multiplayer games alone. I've been playing through Phantasy Star Online on Dreamcast, a game where playing online was the main appeal, it's in the title, and I've been playing it exclusively offline by myself, and I've been having a great time. It's still fun alone, but of course Fusionfall is a lot more fun if you're playing with friends. Running around defeating swarms of monsters, tearing through dungeons with your group. There's huge bosses that appear randomly that are nearly impossible to take down alone. The game's definitely a lot easier in a group, but it's also a much better time. There is some weird stuff that can come up, like if one person isn't close enough to a teleporter, nobody else can use that teleporter. So hypothetically, you could trap your entire group in a dungeon just by running away from the teleporter. Not that I would ever do that, of course. It's a really good time, even if we spend most of that time standing around spamming emotes and dancing.
Let's dance!
To the lab again, we messed up. Back to the lab again, not again. Back to the lab again.
So, what's this game all about, anyway? Well, Planet Fusion, ruled by Lord Fuse, is on a path of destruction across space, consuming other worlds to make Fusion bigger and stronger, and their next target is the world of Cartoon Network. Fusionfall actually takes place years after the events of the different shows, and the fight against Fuse is being led by a grown-up Dexter. His company Dex Labs is developing technology and weapons to fight back against the Fusion Army, even teaming up with his childhood rival Mandark and his own company Mandark Industries. As Fuse destroys and corrupts more of the planet, Dex Lab sets up barriers around infected areas too far gone to prevent them from spreading further. Landmarks like Captain Stickybeard's Sweet Revenge, Mandark's old lab, even Megas XLR seem to be beyond saving. It's nice seeing how these characters end up years after the show's ended, and what they go with is fitting. And actually, a lot of these cartoon characters feel right at home fighting in a gritty, high-stakes war against an alien army. The characters from Ben 10 fight aliens all the time, this is nothing new for them. And the kids next door are essentially the main army fighting against the fusions. They're stationed at all these different outposts all over the world, delivering supplies and fending off monsters, and yeah, that makes perfect sense. But how do you translate a series like Ed, Edd and Eddy to something like this? This is a cartoon about some dudes hanging out, coming up with dumb ideas to scam money out of the other kids in the cul-de-sac. How would they even react to a serious threat against their lives and the possible ending of their planet? Well, war profiteering. The Eds have built a giant fortress made out of cardboard boxes around the entire cul-de-sac, put themselves in charge of it, and are offering sanctuary inside. And the funniest part is, this totally works. The fusion monsters are just looking at the fortress like, man, what are we gonna do? They've got boxes. And Eddie's free to be its king, finally coming up with a scheme that works out in his favor, at least for a while. We'll get back to that. This is the brilliance of Fusionfall's world building. They have such a perfect understanding of every character from every show, and they naturally blend them into a situation that their own series might not normally go to. If an earth-shattering war somehow broke out in the Ed, Edd and Eddy cartoon, of course they would come up with a stupid idea to not only protect themselves, but make a profit. Everyone here is perfectly in character, but there's one character we should probably address first. Who are you, and what's your role in all of this? How your character gets involved in the war depends on when you started playing. The game's original opening, The Future, was replaced with the Academy a few years after release. Both of these are drastically different, so let's talk about The Future first. You're a volunteer helping Dexter with a time travel experiment when his sister Dee Dee pushes a random button, causing you to go much further into the future than expected.
Prepare for launch.
Ooh, what does this
2,
button do?
1, BB! No!
In this dark future, the world has been almost completely destroyed. And I mean that literally. The suburbs have been ripped apart with bridges suspended over a sea of green slime connecting them. Nearly everything has been consumed by fuse. Buildings are toppled over, there's massive craters everywhere. Even the inside of the cul-de-sac was badly attacked. They found a way around those boxes somehow. In Sector V, the kids next door treehouse base, which is normally held up by a magnet, has been toppled, leaving them defenseless. There's this sign that says Peach Creek Estates, and in the future, it's broken to say P-Reek. Things are truly dire. Most of your favorite characters have been killed by this point, with the few remaining survivors fighting to protect what little they have left. You can really feel how desperate the situation is, and yes, I'm describing a game with Johnny Bravo in it.
Check the packs. Man, I'm pretty.
Your main objective in the future is to get the necessary parts to fix the time machine, to return to the past, and undo the future, that is Fuse. You gotta get back to the past. This sounds familiar. Yeah, this is just the plot of Samurai Jack. It's a really cool way of incorporating that series. After fixing the time machine, using Larry 3000 from Time Squad, another nice touch, you return to the past where the game really begins. The whole world opens up to explore with beloved characters who did not die, at least not yet. Now that you know how bad things are going to get, you know how important this fight is. But a few years later, the future was completely removed from the game, being replaced with the Academy. This one's much simpler. You're just in a military academy, and after completing your training, you're sent to go fight. I really prefer the story of the future. You get a real sense of urgency, and without the future, Jack's importance is kinda lost. At the end of the game, he's the one who gives you the mission to defeat Fuse, and without that big role at the start, it just doesn't feel as climactic. But I do still like the Academy quite a bit. The new locations are really cool, the Null Void from Ben 10, the petting zoo from Generator Rex. This version has a lot of content from Cartoon Network shows that were too recent to get much or any representation in the original game. Despite its shortcomings, I can't complain too much when they added characters from Symbionic Titan, one of my top 5 favorite CN shows. Yeah, sure, whatever, that's cool. Where's Robotomy at? With the Academy update, they added a lot more stuff around the main world too, not just the tutorial. So let's finally talk about the rest of this world after a short commercial break. Fusionfall Cartoon Network Universe will be right back. As you might have noticed, I haven't really said a whole lot about Fusionfall's gameplay so far, and that's because there's not really a whole lot to say. You get to run around this massive open world and collect missions from characters. They'll send you to go fight some monsters, get through a platforming challenge, deliver an item to another character, typical MMO stuff. You can get different weapons and armor to make yourself stronger, you can get a bunch of cool accessories based on stuff from the shows, and vehicles to get around quicker. There's other forms of transportation too, Mojo Jojo's Flying Monkey Service or the K&D Scampers. Of course, you can just walk everywhere if you want. There's plenty of cool platforming stuff too. One of my favorite areas is the Kids Next Door treehouse in Sector V. You jump on these springs to get up to the main area, you can actually climb up to the roof on the side here, and then go all the way to the top of the treehouse. There's not really any reason to, there's nothing up here, but it's still cool that you can do it. Back in the day when people actually played this game, you'd always see people trying to get up here. Only the real Fusionfall gamers could make it all the way up. One of the more interesting gameplay elements are the nanos. Lord Fuse has used fusion matter to create spooky, evil versions of CN characters, but by defeating them, you can use that fusion matter to make cute little chibi versions who will help you. You can keep 3 at a time, and they'll have different abilities to choose from. Some can heal, attack, stun, give you a speed boost, give you extra experience, give you extra jump so you can climb up the pointless treehouse. There's a lot of different ways to customize your team. It's really fun collecting different characters, seeing what abilities they have, and watching them dance alongside you. And it's even better playing with friends to coordinate nano teams with the best coverage. On my main save, I'm using the 3 Powerpuff Girls as my squad: Blossom, Bubbles, and Ice King.
Fun is my middle name. Fun is my middle name.
Speaking of the Powerpuff Girls, they do a really good job of representing this series. The city of Townsville is huge. You can visit Mojo Jojo's volcano where he's building his army. It's fun seeing the villains helping out. Mojo's dynamic with Mandark and Vilgax is amazing. They hate each other so much, and the 3 of them keep giving you missions to undo each other's work. You can also visit the mayor at City Hall, and the whole area around it's really cool. In the show, there was this running joke where you could never see his secretary Miss Bellum's face. It was always obscured by something. In Townsville, there's a statue of her, but the head's been broken off so you can't see her face. It's such a funny detail. But wow, Townsville's in really rough shape. Is Fuse's army really that powerful? The Powerpuff Girls were insanely strong in their series. Well, you see, they balanced things out by killing off one of them. Sometime before Planet Fusion's arrival, the Powerpuff Girls fought against Mojo. Buttercup was blasted into the sea and was never seen again. Her family's been searching for her, but they don't even know if she survived. There's a mission in the game called Remember Buttercup. That's just Blossom and the professor dealing with their loss. I do think this storyline's really interesting, and it's not really something that would be explored in the original series. This is actually one thing I prefer in the Academy version. Buttercup's one of the main characters in the future, so the original game sort of spoils this storyline, whereas she's completely absent in the Academy's opening. Of course, she isn't actually dead, but I like how it makes this big mystery out of it, even referencing it in the music. Fusionfall's soundtrack is just incredible. You have these dark, eerie remixes of each show's theme songs to really hit home that these worlds are being horribly corrupted. Here's an example. One of those closed-off infected zones is Pokeoke's Junior High, the Powerpuff Girls' old school. These areas are corrupted so badly that the ground itself is ripped apart and floating. They act as the game's main platforming sections. Anyway, the music here is a remix of the Powerpuff Girls theme. The original song teaches you everything you need to know about these characters in a really simple and effective way. Blossom, Commander and the Leader. Bubbles, the joy and the laughter. Buttercup, she's the strongest fighter. In Fusionfall, it plays the Blossom and Bubbles sections. But instead of the Buttercup section, it just repeats the first two again before going into this dark, evil-sounding music before fading into silence, representing Buttercup's fate. This game has great music. I know from what I've described, this game sounds depressing and miserable, but it is mostly kept pretty lighthearted. These are still goofy cartoon characters. Even if they're put into a pretty dark situation, that silliness is still intact. You might be on a serious and dire mission, but you're doing it while looking like this. The game doesn't take itself too seriously most of the time. And they also know what characters can and can't work with the more serious stories. There's a good balance with the humor. I can't talk about every show in that much detail because we would be here for hours if I talked about every reference to every one of these shows. So we're gonna rush through, talk about the big stuff, the really cool stuff, just to give an overview of what Fusionfall's world is really like. You can explore Ennsville from Billy and Mandy, complete with their theme song. Billy looks like this, yikes. Him is also hanging out here and fits right in, this dude rules. The graveyard has some of the coolest enemies, it's full of ghosts and vampires and pumpkin dudes. Oh, Dracula shows up during Halloween. Haas Delgado, the paranormal bounty hunter, is here. And Grimm's role in the game is just so neat. When you die in Fusionfall, you actually die. You're for real dead. But it's okay because the Grim Reaper has resurrection points that you just respawn at. That's so convenient. Until eventually too many people die at once to where I assume this just stops working, but hey, that's a problem for the future. But I have to talk about one of my favorite Cartoon Network shows.
Eustace, Muriel, somebody's at the door. Creepy, surreal, someone better get the door. Someone better get the door. Who's gonna get the door? Courage the cowardly dog. Courage the cowardly dog.
Nowhere is perfectly done. It's a flat, endless desert with the house in the middle of it. Alongside Courage, you have the magic tree of Nowhere, the space chickens, and those eggplant guys from that one episode. Also the corpse of Robot Randy. Rest in peace, Randy. They picked some of the most random monsters from the show, but none of the recurring cast. No cats, no Lick Quack, no Shirley, not even Muriel and Eustace. Although that's perfectly in character. No alien invasion could make Eustace get out of that chair.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting out of this chair.
They gave the eggplants and space chickens a whole storyline about their armies at war with each other, before realizing the conflict was actually started by the fusion eggplants and chickens. Fusionfall likes to pull a lot of this Sonic Adventure 2 nonsense, where these clearly green aliens are mistaken for the real characters somehow. While I would have loved to see more of the Courage cast, picking a few monsters who are actually just misunderstood regular dudes is pretty accurate to the show. Most of the Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends cast also make an appearance. They actually translate really well to this art style. They look pretty good here. The Foster's house is so cool, they did such a good job with it. They included the hedge maze and the giant cage in the back. A bunch of the fusion monsters here are based on different imaginary friends. They added a mission later on where you can even fight monsters inside the house. This looks so cool. The characters aren't too involved in the actual war. For the most part, they're just keeping to themselves and taking care of the house. Although the friends do give off imaginary energy, which seems to repel fusions, and they do some neat stuff with that. I'd say the most important of the friends is Coco, oddly enough. She's laid eggs all around the world, and if you find one, you can get a temporary boost. There's also these mechanical versions of Coco that you can get rare items from. They give a lot of love to some of the lesser-known shows, too. Juniper Lee and Coop from Megas XLR are in the game, both with an area from their own series. There's no old Hanna-Barbera stuff in the game, sadly, so no Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, anything like that. There is a place in the jungle, Hanny Baba Temple, and totem poles featuring the characters. I'm glad they were referenced somewhere in the game. In the Darklands, there are a lot of prehistoric areas, but calling this Bedrock City is maybe a bit of a stretch. Although, in all honesty, the real place is about as nightmarish and desolate as this looks, maybe even worse. Not even Fuse's army could do this. One of the weirdest shows included in Fusionfall is Camp Lazlo. There's 6 different areas from the show, statues of the characters, but none of the characters. My gym partner's a monkey has a similar case where there's an area but no characters. Apparently they were planned to have NPCs, but had trouble translating more animalistic characters into Fusionfall's art style. as we see with Courage. And thus, we were denied a 2000s anime aesthetic Laszlo. Forget anime Laszlo, that would have been cool. The real bummer is that we didn't get to see Sheep from Sheep in the Big City in this art style. The Cartoon Network characters in Fusionfall are cool and awesome, except for the ones who aren't, but we haven't really touched on the other half of this war yet. The fusions are so simple, but so cool. There's the basic fusion spawns, your classic Goomba-likes, and the rest are just Earth things corrupted by them. Some of Dexter's technology was stolen and turned into monsters. There's lots of dudes just made out of random garbage in the junkyard, guys made out of the ground. Okay, this guy's just a filing cabinet, and their name is Vile Cabinet.
Cabinet. Or killer. Depends on the war.
Can I, like, switch sides in this conflict? Vile Cabinet kinda rules. New characters and events were always being added to Fusionfall after release. Some of these were really cool, some were a bit disappointing. Let's talk about them. In 2010, they started Fusionfall Adventures. These were a series of side stories from different shows. The first was a Ben 10 expansion. There was a good amount of Ben 10 stuff in the base game, and they added some cool stuff here where you get to go inside of ship. Now, I didn't watch a lot of Ben 10, that's probably my biggest Cartoon Network blind spot, so I don't have a ton to say about it. The next was a Chowder expansion. Chowder would appear for seasonal events, but this gave him a permanent home in the game. The inside of Chowder's mouth has been infected, and you have to shrink down and fight monsters to rescue his friends who are trapped inside of him. Yeah, this one's weird. I kinda like it. I mean, it's fun. We're gonna come back to this one later. Another Fusionfall adventure added a very familiar ice mountain. The Ice King has traveled to this time period somehow and has begun kidnapping princesses. The cast of Adventure Time all look a little bit horrifying in this, especially Jake. I don't know what happened with Jake. Once again, they all look amazing as nanos, though. They added a ton of Adventure Time content towards the end of Fusionfall's life. And it's really weird just because of the time that all of it was added in. This was Season 1 Adventure Time, which is just so different compared to what the show would eventually become. There's so many references to weird one-off quotes and jokes from the first few episodes, it's really bizarre to look back on. Look guys, it's a Lumpy Finn reference. You Adventure Time heads like Lumpy Finn? The characters chosen too, like Marceline would eventually become one of the main characters, but she was only in 2 Season 1 episodes, so she's not in the game. Instead, we have the Reaper guy with the wizard portal hanging out in the graveyard, and Stanley the Watermelon who sells you Adventure Time t-shirts? Alright, yeah, cool, sure. There's hidden snails all over the world too that give out items, that one's actually really cool. Fusionfall's a really neat little time capsule of this early era Adventure Time. Generator Rex surprisingly has a bunch of stuff too. They added Providence HQ on the outskirts of Townsville, Providence agents all around the city, a new method of transportation, a bunch of characters and missions. You would hardly know that this wasn't in the game originally, it's integrated really well. This is what I wanted from new content, but not every series got this same treatment. Oh, they added the Secret Saturdays, that's so cool! They give you a single nano mission and nothing else. They're just standing around doing nothing. Symbionic Titan had some stuff in the Academy tutorial, but after that, just one nano mission again. These are both story-heavy action shows that would have fit perfectly in the world of Fusionfall, and they just get a handful of characters who stand there with no missions or anything. Johnny Bravo has a whole location inspired by him, and he only gets one mission. Bravo Beach was in the game at launch, but Johnny wasn't even added until later, which is weird. He did appear for a few seasonal events where he gave out missions, but those don't seem to be in the revival. Johnny Test is also here with one nano mission, but considering that didn't originate as a Cartoon Network show, that makes sense. This feels like a guest character. Tom from Toonami even shows up, that's kinda weird, but cool. Sadly, no missions, but the Clydes are hidden all around the world, and they sell you exclusive Toonami armor and weapons. I actually really like this. And then some shows just came out too late. Gumball and Regular Show have a couple nanos that you can get through codes, but no NPCs, no areas, no other items or references. Fusionfall stopped getting updates before they could add anything else from them. Which is a real shame, because the park from Regular Show and that whole cast would have been great additions. Although, to be fair, these guys have dealt with much worse than an alien army consuming their entire planet. Give them like 5 minutes, oh, the war's over, back to work. It would just be unfair for Lord Fuse if the game had Muscle Man, the strongest character in all of fiction. You wanna know who else is the strongest character in all of fiction? But the one that hurts me the most is Flapjack. Flapjack has a nano and a couple other missions, but this series would have worked perfectly in Fusionfall. Sticky Beard's candy pirates are all over the map. It would have been awesome to see Flapjack and Captain Knuckles interact with them. And Stormalong Harbor would have been such a cool location. And what really hurts is that it was apparently planned as an expansion but was scrapped. Remember those weird missions inside Chowder's mouth? Supposedly this was intended to be the inside of Bubby the Whale, but was repurposed for Chowder when Stormalong was cancelled. I keep saying, oh, this would be a perfect fit for Fusionfall, and I feel like I should explain what that means. It's not just a, hey, I like this show, therefore it should be in the game. The point of Fusionfall is exploring the shared world and seeing characters interact. Shows that are given a lot of attention are ones that have something of a story or at least a basic premise, an interesting setting with good world building, and characters with very distinct personalities. Some shows like Cow and Chicken or I Am Weasel are more about putting characters in wacky scenarios, which isn't a bad thing for those shows, but trying to put them into Fusionfall there's not really a whole lot to work with. I love Sheep in the Big City, but I don't think it would add a whole lot to the Fusionfall experience if it was here. I think the world of Fusionfall would have benefited a lot pulling more from some of these shows. Like Johnny Bravo, a lot of these characters were present during seasonal events, but it's a shame they didn't have a bigger role in the overall game and world. Still, it is nice that they were included in some form. Fusionfall was important for a lot of reasons, one of which was the timing. In 2009, Cartoon Network started heavily pushing live-action shows, while giving very little attention to their actual cartoons. I've talked a bit about this before if you want more details, but this massively hurt the network and its reputation for a bit. Fusionfall's timing could not have been better. While Andrew WK had temporarily replaced the cartoons as the face of the network, we had this huge celebration of what drew us into the network, carrying us through this dark era. Fusionfall had a really strong start, and ended with a pretty unfortunate fate. When they added that massive Academy expansion, I remember being so optimistic for the game's future. They were going to add all of these new characters, nanos, areas to explore. They had so much ambition left for this game. I stood around on Mount Everest in the Academy tutorial for at least an hour, just looking at all the new stuff. This was our first look at the regular show nanos. I was beyond hyped. They teased so much, showed us that this game wasn't going anywhere, that there were big plans in the works, and not even a year later, Fusionfall would receive its final update. It's sad that they weren't able to add everything they wanted into the game, but everything we got was so good that it's hard to be too upset about it. Fusionfall really feels like a too good to be true scenario. A huge crossover with redesigned and aged up characters where you get to freely explore their world as aliens try to destroy it. I seriously doubt we'll see a project this simultaneously weird and ambitious again. This is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. We've seen other crossover games since. Project Exonaut was a short-lived robot multiplayer game. There's a Fusionfall spin-off called Fusionfall Heroes, but that didn't last long. And of course, Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion. Everyone hates this one. I actually kinda liked it, but none of these other games had anywhere near the ambition or impact as Fusionfall. I always wish they would make Fusionfall a show. Can you even imagine something remotely close to those early cinematic trailers? There's so much potential for stories in this world. And some of these character designs are just way too cool to be wasted on an online game that shut down a decade ago. Fusionfall stopped updating in late 2011 and shut down in 2013. And for me, that feels kinda fitting. That's around the time I stopped watching Cartoon Network. Not that I thought their new stuff was necessarily bad, I was just starting to be interested in other things. Fusionfall just feels tailor-made for me. I grew up with these cartoons. I watched Kids Next Door religiously with my friends. I went to the Powerpuff Girls movie in theaters. I saw the Foster's Home premiere while staying at a hotel. I got weirdly emotional watching the Ed, Edd and Eddy finale first air. Watching Camp Lazlo in the lobby of the hotel my mom worked at in the mornings. I watched a lot of Chowder in my dark underground tornado bunker. There wasn't even a tornado, it was just cozy down there. I bought episodes of Flapjack to watch on my tiny iPod Nano on long car rides. I stuck around when they were heavily promoting Andrew WK doing whatever it was he was doing, and I was there for Adventure Time and regular shows premieres. But the point is, I remember these events so vividly. I remember the complete layouts of the rooms that I watched all of these things in, and where I was in relation to the TV as I was watching it. This stuff was just important to me back then. This game might be grindy and repetitive and tedious, but none of that matters to me. I love everything about it. This game is a time capsule for the exact time period when I watched Cartoon Network, and for me, Fusionfall was my series finale.
I got you now. You want some more cyborg?
Now where did I park that thing?
Here you go, Professor.
Trash disposal. Check.
Get to the van!
There, don't flood it, you stupid dog.
This is Cartoon Network.